You pass them every day. On the street, on the subway, in the elevator, faces. Dozens of them, hundreds if you live in a city. And somewhere in your brain, without you ever deciding to, most of them simply stop being people. Not monsters, not enemies, just something less. A background, a shape with legs, a moving obstacle between you and wherever you were going. You would never say it out loud. You would feel uncomfortable even thinking it. But your brain is doing it anyway. Beneath your awareness, beneath your values, beneath everything you believe about who you are. And the unsettling truth is that this is not a flaw. It is a feature, one that is ancient, precise, and extraordinarily dangerous. This is the psychology of dehumanization. And it starts inside every one of us. To understand why your brain does this, you need to go back, not centuries, millennia. Your brain was not built for the world you live in. It was built for a world where the number of humans you would ever encounter in your lifetime was small enough to count. Evolutionary anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed in the early 1990s that the human brain evolved to manage social relationships with roughly 150 people. That is your Dunbar number. 150 individuals whose faces, histories, alliances, and moods your brain could track reliably. Beyond 150, the system starts to strain. Beyond 1,000, it quietly starts making shortcuts. Think about what that means in a modern city. In a single commute, you may pass more people than your ancestors saw in a year. Your brain cannot give each of them a full psychological profile. It cannot extend to every stranger the same cognitive warmth, the same depth of imagined inner life that it extends to your family or your friends. So it does something efficient, it flattens them. This flattening has a name. Psychologists call it infrahumanization. It was first described formally by Jacques-Philippe Léon and his colleagues in the early 2000s. Their research showed that people consistently attribute uniquely human emotions, things like nostalgia, remorse, or admiration, more readily to their own social group than to outsiders. Strangers are seen as capable of basic emotions, fear, anger, pleasure. But the deeper, more complex emotional world that is reserved almost automatically for people who look and sound and live like you. This is not prejudice in the way most people imagine it. It does not require hatred. It does not require any conscious decision. It operates quietly in the background of every interaction, every glance, every moment you fail to wonder about the inner life of someone you walk past. The stranger is not your enemy. They are simply less real to you. And your brain has a mechanism that makes this visible if you know where to look. There is a region in your brain called the medial prefrontal cortex. It activates when you think about people, when you imagine their thoughts, their feelings, their desires. It is, in a sense, the seat of your social brain, the part of you that reaches out and assigns another creature an inner world. Neuroscientist Lawsona Harris conducted a series of imaging studies at Princeton in the mid-2000s that produced one of the most disturbing findings in modern social neuroscience. When participants were shown images of drug addicts and homeless people, this region of the brain, the part that lights up for people, largely went silent. The brain treated those images less like faces and more like objects. Let that settle for a moment. It was not that participants hated these groups. Many of them consciously expressed sympathy. But beneath that sympathy, at the level of automatic neural processing, something extraordinary was happening. The circuit that makes you feel like you are dealing with a full human being had partially switched off, without any intention, without any malice, just because the brain had decided in a fraction of a second that those images fit a certain category. And categories are everything to your brain. Your brain is a categorization machine. From the moment you are born, it is sorting, safe or unsafe, familiar or foreign, in-group or out-group. This sorting is not arbitrary, it is survival logic. Your ancestors lived in a world where strangers were genuinely dangerous. A face you did not recognize could mean a rival tribe, a competitor for food or resources, a threat to your children. The brain that treated unfamiliar faces with suspicion had a small but real survival advantage over the brain that welcomed everyone equally. That bias is still in you. Social psychologist Henri Tajfel demonstrated in a landmark series of experiments in the 1970s that humans will form in-group loyalties and out-group biases over almost nothing. In his minimal group paradigm, participants were divided into groups based on completely trivial criteria, like whether they preferred paintings by Klee or Kandinsky. Within minutes, they began favoring members of their own meaningless group. Within hours, they were actively trying to maximize the difference in outcomes between groups, even when doing so was irrational. You do not need a reason to divide. The brain divides first and finds reasons later. But here's where it gets stranger. Here's the counterintuitive twist that most conversations about dehumanization miss entirely. The capacity to dehumanize is not just about fears. It is not just about tribalism. It is also, paradoxically, about the cost of full humanity. Truly seeing another person is expensive. It requires attention, emotional processing, and a kind of cognitive generosity that burns real mental resources. Every time your brain grants a stranger a full inner life, imagines their morning, their heartache, their small joys, it is doing something demanding. And in a world where you are surrounded by thousands of strangers every day, doing that for everyone would be neurologically unsustainable. The psychologist Paul Bloom made a related argument in his writing on empathy that our capacity for deep emotional resonance is fundamentally limited and tends to collapse at scale. You can be devastated by the suffering of one specific child. You can feel almost nothing at the death of thousands, because thousands is not a face. Thousands is a number, and numbers do not have inner lives. This is not a moral failing. It is a bandwidth limitation. Your empathy was designed for proximity, not statistics. And yet, this same limitation, this same efficient shortcut, has been the psychological engine behind some of the worst things humans have ever done to each other. Every large-scale atrocity in recorded history has been preceded by a campaign of verbal and symbolic dehumanization. The targets were described as animals, as vermin, as diseases, as objects. The language was always the same in structure, even when it changed in content, because the propagandists understood, perhaps intuitively, what Lassana Harris would later confirm in a brain scanner, that if you can get someone to stop activating that medial prefrontal cortex when they look at a group of people, you have effectively turned off the circuit that makes harming them feel wrong. The dehumanization was never really about the target. It was always about engineering the psychology of the perpetrator. Philosopher David Livingstone Smith, who spent years studying the history of dehumanization across cultures, argued that it exploits a deep feature of the human mind, the intuition that there is a hidden essence beneath the surface of living things. Normally, you apply this intuition to people. You sense that behind every face is an inner world as rich and real as your own. Dehumanizing propaganda works by redirecting that intuition. It suggests that the hidden essence beneath a certain kind of face is not a person, but something else entirely. And once that suggestion takes hold, the intuition works against itself. You look at a face and feel nothing click into place. No recognition of depth, no sense of shared experience, just a surface. This is why the mechanism is so dangerous. It is not an override of your humanity. It is a hijacking of it. It uses the same cognitive tools you rely on every day. Your ability to categorize, your reliance on social cues, your trust in the signals your brain sends you, and turns them toward a different end. So, where does that leave you? Right now, reading this, here's what the research actually suggests about how to counter it. The antidote to infrahumanization is not a lecture. It is not a moral argument, that it is contact and specificity. When you know someone's name, their story, a single fact about their inner life, something shifts. The research shows consistently that individuating information, learning something particular about a specific person, dramatically reduces the brain's tendency to flatten them into a category. A name re-engages the circuit. A story puts the medial prefrontal cortex back online. This is why literature works, why narrative journalism works, why a single photograph of one refugee child can move a nation in ways that statistics never could. It is not manipulation, it is a workaround for a real limitation in your brain's social architecture. And there is something stranger still. Something that the research on dehumanization has revealed almost as a side effect. When you dehumanize another person, you do not leave yourself intact. Studies by Norik Thiele and colleagues at Northwestern University showed that people who scored higher on measures of explicit dehumanization, who more readily described other groups as less evolved or less fully human, also showed signs of psychological rigidity, reduced capacity for nuance, and a diminished sense of their own inner complexity. Dehumanization shrinks the one who practices it. When you reduce another person to a category, you also reduce your own capacity to see clearly. The world gets flatter, the social field gets smaller. The part of you that reads depth in other faces slowly loses the ability to read depth at all. Your brain is extraordinarily efficient. It builds the world it practices building. So the next time you pass a stranger, a face in a crowd, a shape with legs, a background in your day, notice the moment your brain tries to flatten them. Not to judge yourself, just to see it happening, because that is where it starts, and that is where it ends. The same brain that walks past 1,000 faces without wondering once can stop. It can pause on one face. It can ask, even silently, even without any answer, who are you, really? That question, small as it seems, is one of the most radical acts available to you, because it reactivates the oldest circuit you have, the one that reaches out across the gap between one mind and another and says, you are real. I see you. You are not a background. You pass them every day, and the whole time, your brain was deciding what they were worth. Now you know it is doing that. What happens next is up to you.